With Donald Trump sworn in as the 47th president, Americans are already asking, what's going to happen to my money? From rising prices to new tax laws, Trump's next 4 years could have some major financial consequences, and you need to know what's coming. We all have questions about what Trump's new term will mean for us. Will tariffs make everyday items more expensive? Are tax breaks going away? And what happens to student loans or Social Security? By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how Trump's policies could affect your finances, and the moves you might want to consider to stay ahead. Let's start with the big one that everyone has been talking about since Election Day: tariffs. At one point, Trump stated he'd impose a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico, and China with a 10% tariff above any additional tariffs. But what exactly does this mean for you and your wallet? Well, a tariff is essentially a tax placed on goods as they enter the country. So a $50,000 car being imported into the US and being hit with a 25% tariff would mean that the company importing the car would have to pay $12,500 to import it. It's important to realize that US companies importing the goods, not foreign governments, pay the tariffs, which makes it essentially a tax on American businesses. And there are a few scenarios on how this would play out for you, the consumer. First, the US companies that are importing the products and materials that they have to pay a tariff on would simply pass that tax on to you and I in the form of higher prices, i.e. inflation. Second, the US corporation paying the tariff could choose to bear the burden of the tariff themselves, simply eating that cost in the form of lower profits and lower margins. Or third, the foreign companies that are exporting the goods could take on the burden of the tariffs by lowering the prices they're exporting by the value of the tariff so they don't lose their US customers. Luckily, we don't have to guess how this is going to play out, because Trump imposed tariffs before, during his first term. In 2018, then President Trump imposed a 20% tariff on the imports of washing machines. And what happened was, not only did the companies importing washing machines into the US increase the price of their products due to the tariffs, but the companies already making their washing machines in the US also rose their prices to match what their foreign competitors were now charging. So in the end, US consumers were paying upwards of $100 more for a washing machine, regardless of its country of origin, due to those tariffs. And if we see tariffs again this time around, the Peterson Institute for International Economics, my favorite institute for international economics, has estimated that the new proposed tariffs would have a negative impact on Americans of all income groups. They estimate that the average household would lose around $1,700 per year. But now let's move on to something that definitely impacts every one of us: income taxes. In his first term, President Trump passed the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which is set to expire in 2025. Now, he's pledged to extend those tax cuts, which included the following changes. They lowered the rates in 5 of the 7 current tax brackets. They doubled the standard deduction that most everyone is able to claim on their taxes. They changed the itemized deductions, doubled the child tax care credit, and removed the penalty for not having health insurance, which is one of the key things that helped fund the Affordable Care Act. And it increased the limits on the estate tax, amongst the other things you can see on your screen right now. And while Trump has committed to extending these tax cuts, there's been some debate as to what else might change. His vice president, J.D. Vance, has proposed increasing the child tax credit to $5,000, which would drastically lower how much families with children owe in taxes. But that idea doesn't seem to have much support from Trump or the Republican Congress. For most Americans, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act meant lower taxes and a larger standard deduction. But those in the higher earning income brackets definitely benefited much more than anyone else. An analysis by the Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center shows that nearly half of the benefits from these tax breaks would go to the top 5% of all households, those who make over $450,000 per year. For example, the tax cuts save the top 1% of households about $70,000 on average, while they save middle-income households, such as yours or mine, only around $1,000, all while adding $4.5 trillion to the national deficit over the next 10 years, which could have serious long-term consequences for the economy. So if the TCJA is extended, your tax bill might not change much, at least for now. But there is a chance the tax cuts could expire in 2025, in which case we'd all see changes in our taxes. While tax cuts have an effect on spending and the economy, another proposal that could directly affect consumers and a rapidly growing industry is Trump's stance on the EV tax credit. Under the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, buyers can get a tax credit of up to $7,500 on the purchase of a new electric vehicle or $4,000 on a used EV. These tax credits make electric vehicles significantly more affordable and have played a major role in their growing adoption. But President Trump wants to scrap the EV tax credit, which is interesting due to his close relationship with Elon Musk, CEO of the world's largest EV company, Tesla. You'd think those two would be at odds over removing the tax credit to purchase new EVs due to the impact that government support and a prior round of EV tax credits, which were available through 2019, played in the growth of Tesla. $3.4 billion in tax credits went to people purchasing Teslas in that time span, where there were far fewer competitors in the EV market. Now, Elon is actually in favor of ending those tax credits, saying it primarily benefits Tesla's competitors. In any event, the EV tax credit is a bit harder to kill than it might seem on the surface, because Congress would need to amend the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a much larger package of initiatives, or they'd need to replace it with a new law to get it done. If you have your eyes set on buying an EV in the near future, it might be better to act sooner rather than later, because Trump scrapping the EV tax credit could cost you thousands of lost dollars on your next vehicle purchase. You can research makes and models that are currently eligible for the credit at fueleconomy.gov. Now, another key financial issue that we need to talk about is credit card fees. In March of 2024, the Biden administration and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau enacted a rule that limited the typical credit card late fee from $32 to $8. The idea behind this rule was to limit what they considered junk fees, unnecessary or excessive fees that banks were imposing on customers. Lowering that fee to $8 could save 45 million people an average of $220 per year, or $10 billion total. As expected, the banking and credit card industry pushed back against this Biden rule, and it's been tied up in the courts ever since. President Trump doesn't support the capping of late fees that the banks or credit cards can charge, so the $8 limit is likely DOA, and the banks would be free to charge customers whatever they wanted as a late fee. And while President Trump doesn't support limiting late fees, he has floated the idea of capping credit card interest rates at 10% to help consumers manage debt. Although it's almost certain that the banks would push back even harder on that than they did on late fees. In any case, the best way to avoid any of these fees and charges is to just pay your credit card bills on time, and always make sure you're paying off the full balance when you do so. Another financial relief effort that was a signature feature of the outgoing Biden administration that's likely to shift under Trump's presidency is student loan forgiveness. During his 4 years in office, President Biden canceled about $190 billion in student loan debt for over 5 million borrowers. But that relief is coming to a halt. Trump and most Republicans have made it clear they don't support forgiving student loan debt. So if any of you are still carrying student loans, don't count on any new relief in the next 4 years. That said, if your loans were already forgiven under one of Biden's initiatives, you're in the clear. There's nothing the new administration can do to reinstate your debt, so you can rest easy. But for the millions of Americans still paying off student loans, it's probably time to buckle up and prepare for the long haul. Without additional forgiveness, many borrowers are going to need to consider other options, like restructuring their payments or refinancing to get lower interest rates. In any case, the future of student loan relief looks bleak, and it's something you'll need to plan for. So while student loan relief is a relatively new topic, Social Security is always one of the most critical economic issues for any president. And Trump has promised not to cut one penny from Social Security. But some of his other proposals might put his future at risk. Trump has suggested eliminating federal taxes on Social Security benefits, as well as on tips and overtime pay. And while that sounds good in the short term, those taxes help fund Social Security, which is already underfunded, as we all know. Removing them could make a bad situation even worse. In fact, independent analysis from the Tax Policy Center and the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget show that under Trump's proposals, the Social Security Reserve Fund could be depleted by 2031. And if that happens, there would be a 33% reduction in benefits by 2035. To put that in perspective, for the average Social Security recipient, that 33% cut could mean losing hundreds of dollars each month. Money that those retirees depend on to cover basic expenses. Of course, none of these proposals have been put into effect yet. They're just ideas that Trump has floated out while campaigning. But the potential risks are real, and it's something to keep an eye on as his administration moves forward. And obviously, what actually happens could turn out differently from any of these proposals that we've discussed. So, what can you do to protect your money as we head into Trump's second term? Here are a few key steps you might want to consider. Number 1, increase your retirement account contributions. With Social Security's future uncertain, especially for younger generations, it's more important than ever to focus on building your own retirement savings. Max out your Roth IRA, contribute to your 401k beyond your employer's match, and start preparing for a future where Social Security might not be as reliable as we'd like it to be. The second thing you can do is prepare for inflation. If Trump moves forward with the tariffs he's proposing, we could see price increases across the board. And if his tax cuts expand the national deficit, that could push inflation even higher. And the best way to protect yourself for inflation is to stay invested in the stock market. Over the long term, stocks tend to grow faster than inflation, helping you not only maintain your purchasing power, but actually increase it over time. The third step I'd recommend you take is to build up your emergency fund. If inflation rises, prices for everyday essentials could spike, putting a strain on your budget. Having a solid emergency fund will help you handle those increased costs without becoming one of the millions of Americans falling into credit card debt. So start building up more savings now, even if you think you already have enough. The peace of mind is worth it. And if you want to learn exactly how much you should aim to save, click on this video right here, where I explain why I think everyone should have at least $25,000 saved in their emergency fund and the benefits of doing so. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.